Absolutely delighted. Absolutely delighted to be here with Jenna. Usually you have long introductions about who is Jenna and everything else. Let me just tell you one thing. 3 continents, rethinking finance in all three. So there's very few people that live such a broad life spent around understanding, changing, rethinking finance. And now here you come with a new book. I understand it's your first book. And I think there's something you want to share about this first book. How is it going? You launched it yesterday and da, 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 drum roll.
Yeah, I love the build up there, Daniel. It's such a pleasure to be here. Super exciting. Yes, I have the book here, Enlightened Bottom Line, and fresh off the press, we just got bestseller status. So it's super exciting, and really pleased to share with all of you, and really looking forward to our conversation here today.
Fantastic. And I had a sneak preview of the beginning of the book, and it starts with a dedication. And usually dedications say a lot about who is this book for. And you dedicate it to your mother, who passed away recently, and to your grandmother. Now, of all the people you dedicate the book to, you chose two people. Why did you choose these two people for something so important to you?
It's such an important part of my journey, and I feel, and particularly in sharing and having this conversation during launch week, I feel such their presence, both my mother and my grandmother, who continue to be a huge source of inspiration to me. Both my mother and grandmother were both entrepreneurs. My grandmother had a store that she ran. I actually share a story about my grandmother and her store in the book, and my mother ran a bed and breakfast. And so from quite a young age, I was really cultivated around this sense of entrepreneurship and female entrepreneurship, and having these inspiring, strong women as guideposts and this north star of what could be possible. And I think also through the love and faith that they instilled in me. My mother's so part of the Baha'i faith, and so teaching me about some of the core teachings of the Baha'i writings, and a lot of emphasis around the equality of men and women, really helped to provide this foundation for much of what I've gone on to do since. And much of my work now is really guided by this, the $82 trillion in the asset management industry, less than 2% being invested in women and people of color run companies and funds. This importance of creating more spaces for advocating for women in financial systems that I know a number of people on the line here today are engaged around, is another through line through much of my work.
And these two women, what do they mean to you?
In one sense, they mean everything. I think in many ways they were both the embodiment of both a deep sense of commitment and kindness to creating spaces of love and dedication, and also joy and humor. They both had an incredible sense of humor, and my grandmother was an artist, and I think the power of bringing creativity to what we're all trying to do in terms of shifting the business and investment systems, the power of the arts in that way. And my mum became a Baha'i in her early 20s, and really cultivated in me this sort of independent investigation of truth and the power of that. And so I think the imprint of both of them, both on me personally, and the kind of the ripple effect through their kind of spirits through the world, is very present.
I think they'll be very happy because your book starts with this phrase that I just mentioned. That one of the phrases that you said is spirituality in business can help both personal growth and global transformation. And there's at least 3 or 4 or 5 oxymorons that what? There's no way. First of all, spirituality in business. Yeah, so many family offices, so many areas say, oh, philanthropy is one thing, finance is a different thing, and investing is different. So mixing the two seems to be impossible. Bringing spirituality, the spiritual sense of something so material, sounds quite incredible. And then personal growth and global transformation. So just in that phrase, there's so much to unpack. Please, how on earth can spirituality in business help both of these personal and global transformations?
I love that question, and it's one that I think about a lot. And there's a framework that I present in the book called the HEAL framework, which stands for hope, empathy, abundance, and legacy. And I think so much of this intersection between personal growth and systemic transformation really comes from the manifestation of some of these core principles. And these really came from the interviews that I did with incredible leaders. We have a couple on the line that I had the chance to interview, Shiva and Darren, who both doing amazing work in terms of shaping financial systems. And I wanted to share an example of a company I had a chance to talk about in the book. They're called Devoted Health, and they've been incredibly successful financially. They just raised around over $13 billion valuation, but they have a practice that they encourage all of their doctors before they engage with each of their patients to go through, which is to close their eyes and imagine that the patient that they're interacting with is a beloved family member. And they credit their success as an organization to that one simple act. And it seems like so small, right? That just imagining this person's part of your family, but they have increased financial performance, they've increased net promoter score, they are, I think, playing a role in shaping the healthcare system through this personal shift. And I think it's a great example of, as we think about this across many different industries, that it can often be these very small actions at a personal level that can both shape organizations, but then also shape systems at large.
And I love that you said not just any family member, a beloved family member, because we all have
Mm,
this family. No, I don't want to serve that guy. Oh,
yeah.
horrible. So that's a very important point to underline.
Yeah.
And and it's very interesting now. The other day I was speaking in Grupo Santander, and they're talking about all their strategy and everything else. And my question was, have you actually walked into one of the branches? Have you spoken to some of the people there? And it's just so interesting how these strategies seem to be at a very global, amazing level, but nobody really speaks or thinks of the person that has to implement it, the people that need to take it forward. In many experiences that you have of dealing with human beings and seeing the effect that finance has on their lives, both on the good and bad, is there something, some story or something that you mentioned maybe in the book about this transformation also in humans, thanks to good or bad finance?
Mm. Yeah, one story that comes up for me around this, and it's also somebody I interviewed for the book, and it's a very successful entrepreneur called Scott Schickler who runs a company called Seven Mindsets, and that he currently run the company he runs, Seven Mindsets, is focused in the education technology space, and he's acquired a number of companies and worked a lot within the broader financial system. And to this point about these simple exercises that we can do, I was asking him about, given the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and, working within financial systems, how does he continue to cultivate a sense of hope and abundance, many of the themes of the book. And he shared that he has a wand on his desk, and when he finds himself in more like scarce fear-based thinking, he literally waves the wand and it helps him to cultivate more of this sense of abundance and possibility. And I love that idea of, what so much of the work that we're all engaged around is really challenging work, right? And that what are the sources of strength that we can draw on, and whether it is exercise like waving a wand, or whether it's prayer or meditation, or things that reground us, that enable us to be able to continue to show up on a daily basis to this work.
The one example I really did not expect, so I'm even more curious to read the book and to see what comes into that. As finance, is it a tool to bring a better world or a worse world? Right now, if you think of finance, what would you put in the chat? Is it a means to a better world or to a worse world? You've got all these unicorns or the bitcoins and everything else. This is very much in the eyes of people, short-term profits and that. What do you feel?
I definitely would resonate with in terms of this possibility for both. I think there's a concept in the Baha'i writings around the forces of disintegration and integration in the world, and I think that very much shows up within our financial systems, where we see at the same time both much of the crumbling of an old world order and many parts of capitalism that are extractive in nature. And again, I'll highlight some of the folks on the line with, Shiva and Darren and others that, are really part of these forces of integration that are building and part of initiatives that are really trying to work within the financial system to shift it. And whether that's in terms of unlocking more capital into women and people of color run companies and funds, or into communities that have been overlooked and underestimated, that this potential of, how do we use this incredibly powerful tool to be able to have this positive impact in the world.
You correctly repeat people of color, women, 21st century. Hasn't the Homo sapiens gone beyond these limited mindsets? And how do you not lose hope? Because we are still not mainstream. We will definitely be one of these days, especially after people read the books. I remind you, her book is already in the bestseller list, so that's definitely a plus. So, what keeps you going when you see this injustice? I think it's the best way to describe it, and this lack of common sense.
I think a big part of it is it's conversations like this. It's conversations like with the people that I had the chance to interview the book. And one of the things that's been so exciting to see, and even just in these last few weeks, is just how much these concepts are resonating with people. And I think how much people are looking for, to your point, a source of hope and possibility and strategies for the execution of that hope and possibility in the world, given just how bad things are getting, right? And it almost does feel, and I think there's a lot in the Baha'i writings around this about, as things get increasingly worse, that the momentum and movement and interest in how are we trying to, contribute towards a civilization and its development becomes that much more important.
And hope is definitely a very powerful element. And there's people in this call who are bringers of hope. And Darren is definitely one of them. Darren, you mentioned in the chat something about this devoted health. And you say yesterday they had a good day. What happens? Give us hope.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they have a lot more capital. I think about 300 million more dollars to continue to scale this insight that Jenna talked about around treating family members, loving family members, as they orient towards driving healthcare outcomes. And you can see the founder there with the big, heart right at the center, kind of driving that company culture, like Jenna talks about in the book. So, um, it's nice when good things happen to good people. Certainly, that doesn't always happen in venture capital or in building great companies. And I think part of what inspired the founders to build such an aligned company is their previous experiences in non-aligned companies. So it took a couple tries to kind of get to a journey that they're currently on and building at the center of a love-based competitive advantage, which, wow, I mean, and it looks like it could be, working quite well.
Thank you very much. And Jenna, Darren just mentioned this journey concept, yeah? And you've been at it for, when did you start? I mean, when you were a baby at the time, but when was the first investments? Was it first in the UK or in China where you started?
Hey, mainly in China, actually. So yeah, maybe I can share a little bit of the arc of the journey, and it's been really amazing, I think, to see just the growth of the whole industry around social responsible investing over the last 10 to 15 years. So I grew up in London. I came and did my undergrad at Stanford, and then coming out of undergrad, I worked between China and DC, investing into socially responsible businesses and funds, very much in collaboration with Darren and actually the founder of the Calvert Funds, Wayne Silby, who wrote the foreword of the book, continues to be a deep source of inspiration for much of our work around this whole field of social responsible investing. And then I went back to Stanford for business school and can now live in the Bay Area and continue to invest in a way that's really trying to bring values into those investments. So I do like early stage investing and lower middle market M&A, or investing in companies in healthcare and climate and much at the intersection with AI through a firm that I ran called Lightpost Capital, and then some broader advisory work in those same areas. And I think really you're seeing, particularly with the intergenerational wealth transfer that's taking place, and more interest from the next generation in a way, in investing in a way that is aligned with their values, and seeing more institutional investors setting up socially responsible investment funds because of their interest from their clients. I think all of these macro trends are really like moving forward the impact investing industry.
And Sophia, you work in the biotech industry, so that's kind of what position, what relationship do you have with money and finance? Are you looking for it? Are you giving it?
That's actually a very interesting time to be asking me that question. I met Jen a few years ago through an impact experience event that I participated for health equity. At the time, I worked in a biotech company as a scientist. I then went on to work in business development for biotech companies, but I'm actually in transition right now to social work. So I'm kind of feeling, the call of this moment to do something different with my life and with my talents. And also spirituality is a really big thing for me. So I actually just got accepted into a master's of social work programs, and I'm going to go in on the, clinical side. Thank you. And to really focus on, at this point, helping individuals in groups from that angle. But I think I'll bring my healthcare, experience and business experience, and I hope to impact that way. And, I have to say that the impact experience I participated in with Jenna and Darren was really, really transformational for me. I actually mentioned that in my essays. So yeah, I've been on the money side. I'm kind of feeling a pull towards working closely and directly with individuals, but really keeping that global and systemic perspective. So that's where I'm up to, kind of going a little bit away from the money side, but, working within the constraints of the system and try to make a difference there.
And thank you so much, Sophia. And Jenna, it's kind of interesting, right? Darren just mentioned these 300 odd million coming to this company, Sophia's life being changed by rethinking really this relationship. You can see the change is happening, but it's still not mainstream. And my question is, if it's good, we know so many statistics, it is financially viable and it works. And that's why on earth doesn't the entire world shift to impact? What's missing?
And I'm going to do what you just did, and I'm going to call on Shiva. No, the look on her face. Because I feel like one of the things that's so exciting, and I'll share after my thoughts on this, but I think one of the things that is so exciting, I think, about Shiva's journey is, working within so many traditional financial systems that, to your point, Daniel, often aren't focused in so many of these areas and ways. And so I think the more that we can effectively diagnose the problem, our ability to effectively diagnose the solutions will be that much greater. Before I do that, I do want to just give a big shout out to Sophia for being both part of this conversation, but also to just share maybe briefly a bit more on the health equity impact experience that we all went through together. Because I think one of the things, and I think it does also tie in a bit to this question, is that it was during COVID, and what the Darren and I co-founded this organization, and this is also to give Shiva a little bit of time to think about the response to the question. So I can see you studiously writing notes there. Is that as a world, right? We were all, and still are, right? But trying to work out how do we navigate, this moment, and the power of being able to be in community and to be able to think about, and in the same way, I think many of the challenges that we see with systemic inequities within the financial system, we certainly see that within the healthcare system. And so to see people like Sophia who dedicated their life to addressing some of these inequities within the healthcare system feels, more important than ever. And so I'm super excited that you're part of this and that you're kind of dedicating your time and energy towards that. Okay, Shiva.
Oh my God. And here I thought I would just enjoy a lovely, inspirational talk. And now you make me work hard. It's a big question, Daniel. And I would say that we need a much more integrated, systemic, and holistic approach to finance, right? As a society, but also, I mean, as a society, as a business, and as an individual. The current model is that you have these billionaires, right, make money using all the, shareholder maximization and hardcore, really killing the environment. The fastest way to just maximizing returns. Once they've made the billions, or if they feel guilty, maybe while they have the billions, they then set up a foundation, and they then try to give it all away or give some of it away and do all the goody stuff. And I think unless we really now start thinking both, as I said, as a society, as a business owner, as an individual investor, how we bring in our values and all of the issues in a much more integrated way, we will, I don't think, ever mainstream, impact investing and so on. And what I mean with that is, as a business owner, yes, you can, of course, maximize returns and maximize profitability. But if it comes at the expense of not paying your employees a fair wage, destroying the environment, and all of those things, you have, in a way, even all the good things that you may do later through your foundation, they cannot undo those things. So how about integrating those? But it is, while you're making it, you're actually already preserving the environment, giving it away, having ownership.
You're not postponing the benefits of your business. It's right there in the...
Exactly. And I think if we, at the individual level, and I think this is why Jenna's book, to really bring down to Jenna's book, this actually starts even as an individual investor. As an individual investor, are you the sort of investor who actually puts their money where their values are? Or are you, again, saying, okay, I buy all these oil and gas stocks because I want to make a lot of money, and then I want to actually give it away to a charitable cause? Or do you actually think about, that when you make those investments, you're making them into companies, into projects that actually are, ultimately preserving, living up to your values? And this is the sort of thing I believe we need to find a way to, join up these elements. And to that point, Jenna, I think, has done an amazing job. I haven't read her book yet, though. I ordered it. It's hopefully arriving any day in here in Luxembourg. But from everything,
we're looking forward to your next post that will highlight some good parts of that. Thank you so much. Such a great question to really bring home the key elements, right, of bringing these two. Would you like to share your question, also opening the mic, because it's such a fundamental one?
Absolutely. And great. And thanks for creating this space. And congratulations again, Jenna, on the book launch. My name is Devon. I'm finishing my executive MBA program at Sloan School of Management at MIT. And my question is, what role can managers play towards cultivating organizational environments which support spiritual and personal growth while achieving impact and business success? And are there particular important mindsets leaders need to cultivate and develop?
I love these questions, and thank you so much for bringing them to the group. And I might call back on you and ask you your thoughts afterwards. But I will. I don't know you yet, so I'll share first, and then would love to hear from you. So, a few thoughts. So one is that there's this concept in the Baha'i writings around the idea that everything leaves a trace. And that being the case, whether we're an employer or an employee, certainly in managerial roles. And I think one of the key reflections around this, the question that you're asking here, is what would it look like if every manager was considering what is the trace that they're leaving, right? And what is the trace that they're leaving in how they engage with the people that they're managing, with their contractors, with the suppliers, with the broader community. And the way I frame the book is I have these reflection questions at the end of each chapter, and it's been really interesting hearing from some folks that have read the book that they've been really using these reflection questions as part of conversations within their teams and in their own way of thinking about, exactly to your questions here about like, what are the mindsets that we can cultivate. The other example I wanted to share is that there's a company that talk about in the book and interviewed called Innisfree Hotels, and they're based mainly out of Florida, and they have a chain of hotels and run by Julian and Kim McQueen, and they have really invested in building out, they call it a cultural manual, and it's pretty powerful. Like there's a lot of key concepts there around, no power plays and the power of check-ins and checking your paranoid fantasies, and some of these concepts that are like very tactical ways of embodying what can sometimes be quite lofty principles into management and leadership practices. And they have all of their employees go through a culture training. They regularly come back to many of these principles, and they again credit a lot of their success to the deep investment in these principles. So those are a few reflections that I shared.
And that's and it's fascinating. Before we dive on, of that example that you mentioned of Innisfree Hotels and their values process, it's fascinating because what they do to create a mindset is every week they've got a value of the week. The whole team meets, they have a discussion about it, they have a beautiful document, there's a quote, and then they bring it back to their family and put it on their fridges. And when people are on holiday, they ask, can you give me the value from last week? And then to bring it home and talk about it with the family. So this is where, to me, the change of mindset, sometimes we think about these huge, great strategies, but it's really bringing home, never more like in this case, what this really means and implies. Now, Devon, is up to you now. Forget about everybody else. How do you change mindset, or how did you change your own mindset to be in this positive mindset?
This resonates a lot. I feel like it centers around foundations and sort of the principles that you lay out, and the idea of the value of the week, but what are the rituals and the principles that shared values that you have and that you embody as a leader and continue to model and center the work around. I feel that that's really important as a leader and manager, and cultivating those cultivating as well as kind of building the infrastructure and processes around those values, connecting incentives around those values in terms of how you manage to the work, and the expectations of performance around those values are really important. I feel that leads the mindset to create that environment for the team.
And just so important what you say, because I was thinking about you feeling you are the example that people will pay attention to, and then elevates your thinking about what should I be doing. So you're not just acting randomly or reacting like most people do. There's a thought process in what you're doing because of your role in the organization that then brings you to a better understanding how situation is. Francoise, here's somebody that changes entire organizations, IFRC, the Red Cross. Very curious to hear about your question or your point, Francoise.
Yeah, first a comment. I want a bit to echo what is possible to do. In the Red Cross office I was in charge, we were rebuilding, and we consult with people what kind of buildings they want. And there was a request for meditation room. So I think it's also important sometimes to have a space. And it started with a Muslim colleague during the Ramadan who wanted to do their prayer, and they had nearly to hide somewhere to do their prayer during Ramadan. And then we developed a nice office space where nicely decorated, very, let's say, elevated. And that created people to go on their own or to create a space together, few colleagues to go together. So giving them in a way the power to take the spirituality in their hand, and the space created that, let's say, attraction. And now we are developing the park to become a kind of community park. And what came out is that how to make the part of the park who is like a forest to become a sacred forest and connect the nature spiritually. So we are developing around trees all kind of relationship for making people feeling spiritual in the nature. And that is an extension of that aspect, and we will encourage people to have meeting outside around a tree, for example, trees. So this is what I wanted to share, because sometimes having space and time allocated for that makes things happen.
I wonder how different decisions would be if they were taken in a forest as opposed to in a boardroom or in an office. It would be amazing how different the outcomes would be, probably more sensible.
No, I love this. I mean, a couple of thoughts. Well, one is actually I'm speaking at a panel next week, actually at a conference focused around women and investing, all on designing regenerative spaces. And so it's super interesting to hear your reflections here, and I think there's is so much around what are the physical environments that we're in and what can be cultivated as a result around that. And it's certainly a big part of our work within impact experiences around how do we take people outside of their day-to-day context. And to this point, to Ramin's question around, engaging and realigning board members, a lot of our work is, for example, bringing board members to Montgomery, Alabama, to engage around the historical context and present-day realities around racial inequities within our financial systems and our healthcare systems, and so, but being able to be outside of our offices in the major cities around the world, and in a space and in grounding in history, what can come about as a result of that. I also think the physical space around arts is a really important role in this way. I serve on the board of the Oakland Museum, and I've been amazed to see the convenings that take place in spaces that are set up around the cultivation of creativity and culture. And we talked about my grandmother earlier being an artist. Like, I think there's so much that can be unlocked in that way. And so whether it's in the board question, like having provocateurs that can engage around other ways of thinking about so many of the topics that we're talking about today, or taking people outside of their context, whether to the forest or to an art space, can really be helpful in terms of thinking about that.
And Ramin, now we're curious to hear about your own board's experiences. Where do you meet? And also, what is maybe one question that you found especially useful?
I've had the opportunity to be involved in a few boards, served on one, but as executive. And one of the things that has been a challenge at times is helping people have develop a sense of empathy. When you're dealing constantly with just numbers, everything is about the spreadsheet. I've gone through organizations where we've had, during the 2008 financial crisis, where we had to take a company of 3,000-4,000 people down to 2,500, and it really, all it was just a spreadsheet exercise, and with empathy out the door. And we took some of those lessons during the pandemic. What we did as an executive team, we went to the board and we said, hey, we're going to take a financial hit here through the pandemic. Revenues are going to be down significantly. We all took a significant cut in salary so that no one would be laid off. And we went through that process, and then had a bunch of consultation with our board members and people that were just about the numbers. They were going like, why? Are you guys crazy? Why would you want to do that? And so we went through multiples of meetings, and one of the outcomes of that was that the board actually ended up deciding to allocate a larger percentage of the company's shares in terms of options, so that the entirety of the organization from the reception and up would be able to share in a meaningful way, actually, share in the upside of the company. That was kind of cultivated through that really simple act of wanting to make sure that all of our team members were taken care of during a really complicated time. They gave up an extra 5% of the company for it to be distributed to the rest of the employees. So that was an interesting kind of a practical exercise of helping build empathy beyond just numbers and spreadsheets.
Amazing. And Jenna, I want to touch on at least two other things that Ramin opened our eyes about. Having less money can actually make things better, which is the example that he gave, which is very unnatural. That what? Reducing makes better? And ownership. Am I an employee? Am I working? Financial attribution and so forth. Can you share your thoughts on both the less is not always more and this ownership concept of how does a company change and the mindset when this financial retribution is more universal, more spread?
100%. I think both of those are really important points. And there's a lot of research that shows that actually, once you get to a certain level of income, that anything above that doesn't necessarily lead to any more happiness. And so I think to this earlier point around like, why do we keep sort of feeling this sense of wanting more? And a lot of this theme in the book, in the chapter around abundance, is around thinking about what does enough mean, right? And there's so much where we're always thinking like more, 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 and there's an insatiability that's built into that. But that our ability, and I think it's a spiritual quality to cultivate and develop, and requires a lot of discipline to continue to come back to these concepts of what enough means. I have a bracelet that says enough on it as a kind of reminder of the importance of coming back to that. And then on the second part around
Sorry, can I pause there?
Yeah, please.
Enough is abundance.
I really appreciate you doubling down on that point. I think it's a rethinking, right, of how we think about abundance and the interrelationship between the two. On the ownership piece, yeah, I think it's been really exciting, and I'm really feeling, even just over the last couple of years, seeing more and more experiments and structures that are being created around employee ownership. Obviously we have a historical context around cooperative models, that there are increasing number of fund managers that are looking at structures of investing in companies where part of it is supporting a shift towards employee ownership. We've worked with a few companies that have been going through a journey of doing that. And you can see the sense of dedication and engagement when people operate like their owners, and when they actually are owners, and the financial literacy that goes alongside the process of becoming owners within a company. So I think there's so many ripple effects that come from investing in structures around more collaborative ownership structures. And there's a lot also in the high ratings around the power of profit sharing and creating structures around that. So I think a lot of role for innovation in those areas.
And there's an amazing question by Sophia, and it reminds me of this quote that I mentioned there. There's a Nobel Prize winning chemist, and he said, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order, which connects directly with Sophia's question. Sophia, would you like to voice it?
I just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about so many of us knowing that principle-based investment, values-based investment, and business decisions are the right thing to do, and they're good for business as well, but they're not mainstream. And that made me think of an article I read yesterday from Jonathan Haidt talking about the momentum that has been gained in regulating social media access for children and adolescents, and how several countries are taking action to put laws in place to restrict to increase the age for allowing children and adolescents to access those platforms. And he was talking about this element of everybody knowing that everybody knows. So kind of also quoted Steven Pinker's book on that. And it seems that once you reach that point that everybody knows that this is the right thing, we just need to know that others know that too. And that's what was coming up to me when Daniel was asking that question and Jenna, you were talking about. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts for kind of generating that sense in people that some of us already know this, but how do we know that everybody knows? Because once we reach that point, that's maybe when we really can catalyze fast change.
But he wrote an incredible book called Anxious Generation that is very much talking about a lot of the themes that Sophia is discussing here. And I think actually what's also really powerful about some of his work is that his combination of both the data and with the storytelling with tangible next steps that we can take. And it's been really exciting to see actually how school systems have been implementing a lot of his recommendations around decreasing use of technology and what that can cultivate as a result. And I think there's so much that we can learn from that, particularly as it relates to some of the conversations that we're having today of beginning these conversations young, right? I mean, I think one of the elements that keeps coming up, and someone said to me, have you thought about a children's book related to the themes of your book? I think there's actually something really interesting there. Is that it's wonderful, and so much of the work that Engage in is working with people that are the prime of their career and working to move this work forward in within the organizations that they're part of. But the more that the capabilities and skill sets and desire that I think the younger that is cultivated, the more than when these people are building organizations and part of larger organizations that they're coming to that work with a sense of vision of what's possible. So I think that's one that's really important. I also think that embedded in your question is thinking about incentive structures. That there's a number of organizations that worked with where they've been exploring really interesting incentive structures around relating the ways that people are compensated based on the social and environmental impact of the work that's being done. And I think the more that there can be these types of structures that are not just like, oh, these are nice to have things, but we're actually embedding into the performance reviews and assessments and analysis of these areas, the more that will become kind of institutionalized.
And as Darren is on the call, I'm going to tap into him. And then Illumin Capital, you started with, what was the initial evaluation of Illumin Capital? How long ago did you start it?
Jenna and I co-founded an organization in about 2015 called Impact Experience. And at the first Impact Experience, we gathered together business leaders and community leaders, and all of us made different commitments around things that we were passionate about. And my commitment was to use what I had learned in finance to build a more optimal and inclusive ecosystem. And up until that point, I had identified the problem. And the problem was, as Jenna talked about at the top of the call, that 1.3% of $82 trillion in capital is managed by women and people of color-led private equity or venture funds.
Sorry, again, may I just pause? Mind-blowingly stupid, basically, because you're losing out and just giving 3% to a group of people just based on color or skin. So I still cannot understand how that can be a fact. Sorry.
So it's a good point that is shocking, but what's more shocking is despite the outperformance over 40 years or equal performance of women and people of color-led funds, they don't receive more allocations consistent with that outperformance. So even if we were looking at purely financial focused people as we studied within our research, they lost their 30 years of training. It went basically out the window and left a bunch of money on the table instead of investing in the top performing fund managers when they were different races. Now that's a travesty for humanity and the optimality of investment ecosystems. So Illumin Capital was built as a commitment at the Impact Experience to address this problem by enabling investors to invest in about 40 funds that have holdings in multiple countries, and all of them are doing work through our proprietary Illumin coaching system to address biases in their investment processes, their hiring practices, and to Jenna's point earlier, in the board constructions of the boards that they own and control. Because it's only when they do that work that they can see that we can see, it's not just them, but all of us have biases, that we can see the humanity of people and the value that they bring to the marketplace. So that's a little bit about Illumin. We're about 8 years in since we made that commitment. We manage a little over $315 million, and we invested in lots of different funds. Thanks again to Jenna for celebrating us as an example in the book.
And I made 380. And again, it's performing better than standard. So it's just like a no-brainer. Jenna, what did you, side by side with Darren, what did you learn about how to break these biases and gradually go forward? What opened doors?
No, I think a couple of things that come to mind, and I think it's such amazing work that is having ripple effects within the financial systems. And I mentioned briefly earlier some of the work that we do in Montgomery, Alabama. So with Illumin, they require the fund managers that they invest into to come to. We have 2 impact experiences a year specifically for the Illumin Capital community that includes both the fund managers that Illumin has invested into, as well as some of the investors that have invested in Illumin. And one of the things that's really exciting to see from that is that people who come and take part in these experiences often then go back to their organizations and are inspired to want to allocate more capital into people and communities that have been overlooked and underestimated. So I think this theme that's run throughout our conversation of this intersection between personal transformation and systemic shifts is you really see that firsthand in folks that go through some of these experiences, is that they become aware of the role that biases have played within our systems and within our organizations that then shapes how they then think about asset allocation moving forward. And so much of that is and more is embedded in the theme of the book, and it's been it's super exciting to be having this conversation. And one of the things that's been really exciting also around the book is having conversations internally within companies who are thinking about some of these topics. And I think to this point about creating some of these systemic shifts, and Devon, to your question earlier around training managers, right? It's being able to continue to elevate some of these conversations also internally within organizations. So welcome any thoughts that you all have of communities or folks that you all are connected to where there could be interest or appetite in those conversations. Would love to follow up on that.
This is the beginning of something really beautiful. I'm really happy this book is part of the bestseller list because the world needs it. The world needs to open their minds to what is important, to what is relevant, what is success, what is enough, and what is abundance. You are, with Darren, a perfect example of what this means and how it's applied. You are a gift, truly. So is everybody on this call, really going back to Devon's key points about we are all examples. And the way we are, we behave, we ask, we talk, we demand is what really will change the world. Jenna, thank you so much for this session. It's been delightful. Let's keep it going. And one of these days, see you at the BBF annual conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Bye,
holding
everybody.
the space. Thank you for joining. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.